Hear 'em out.
Hi everyone, welcome to Hear 'em Out. So for today's episode, let's welcome Leonard. He's the founder and lead curator of Project Insight, and we're also going to welcome Tia Narciso. She is the Humanities correspondent of Project Insight. Hi guys, welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having us.
Hello.
How's your quarantine like so far, aside from Project Insight?
I've been really busy. In March, I was just watching movies every day. So I think Jeff knows this because he follows me on Instagram. But I was posting the films that I watch, giving like brief reviews. So yeah, I got into world cinema recently, and I'm trying to watch 200 Asian movies and 200 European movies. Right now, I'm at around 140. Yeah, because back then in March, I was just watching every day, 5 to 8 films every day from all over the world. Yeah, recently, I've been interning at the Department of Health, and I've been working on a project with the Philippine Red Cross. And I was recently elected as the National Officer for Public Health of a National Medical Students Organization. That's also under this bigger mother organization on an international level. So yeah, I've been busier recently, usually on Zoom for an average of like 5 hours a day. I've also been taking Spanish classes and Mandarin classes. So it's Spanish 3 hours a day, Mandarin like an hour a day, like 2 to 3 times a week. So yeah, recently I've been busy.
Aren't you a med student?
Well, yeah, but I guess when it's summer, I'm really more overwhelmed because there's free time and there's so much to do. So I usually become more busy when it's summer as compared to I'm in med school and all I have to do is study and maybe do some org work.
You're so productive.
Oh my gosh, I was gonna you sound so productive. Now I'm shy to share my routine.
No, go
But
share it.
Share with us,
anyway,
please.
I think I'm more like a creature of habit more than like doing so many things like Leonard. So I've been just preparing for the NMAT this coming October and also doing work for Project Insight, doing work for a book club that I'm a part of, and working out and reading a lot of books. I think Leonard has his like film goal. I have my book goal. I'm trying to finish 40 books before school starts in September. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Not as much as what Leonard has been doing.
Both of you guys are still so productive. Galing.
And talking about all these things that you've been doing over the quarantine, you're so busy. And on top of that, not to mention, you have Project Insight, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Yes.
And I'm really curious. You have all of these things going on. You're busy with film, busy with books, so many other different things. But tell us, what was the motivation behind Project Insight? What made you start or initiate this project in the first place?
I could actually break this down into like different parts because there's no singular thing that like inspired me to come up with it. I was able to take inspiration from different experiences throughout the past couple of years. So I guess the first is my background in TEDx. Jeff would know this. So Jeff was actually my first committee head back in Xavier. So
A long time
he was the
ago.
first committee head of TEDx Xavier School. So like at that time, I was like grade 8, I think. I knew that when I was a senior, I wanted to do what Jeff was doing when I was in grade 8. So I wanted to be the committee head that early. So throughout my entire high school, talking to speakers, ideating, that's been really a huge part of my life. And in college, I decided to come up with my own event, TEDx Escolta Street. So it's in line with my advocacy to preserve our cultural heritage. That's why it was situated in Old Manila. And generally, I'm close to the community there, the community of artists, coffee people. Yeah, so it was relatively easy to organize on top of college load because I already had the rapport with the community. I already knew the people in charge or like the people who were running different establishments within it. Aside from that, I'm part of the Intermed program. So it's 2 years of pre-med. The pre-med part isn't as stressful as the med part, obviously. So I just started with first year med last year. I was really busy with ACADS. So I was actually neglecting my other hobbies because I was just focused on ACADS and a few orgs. So I wanted an excuse to get back into my other hobbies. I wanted an excuse to invite chefs, invite filmmakers, like even fields I'm not interested in. The global aspect of it. So I attended my first international conference last January in India and realized
Wow.
that there's this global pool of experts. So I really wanted to tap into that community because from TEDx Savior School and from TEDx Escolta Street, I've been dealing mostly with local experts, but then realized that there's a much larger community out there that also have unique insights to offer. Finally, before the launch of our first event for Project Insight, I actually organized the panel discussion on the Philippine coffee industry. This was just a passion project. Well, Project Insight is also a passion project, but I think it's evolving into something more legit in a way. Um, but but yeah, the coffee panel discussion, I organized it in like 2 to 3 days. I wanted to do something meaningful for my birthday. Even if it only took 2 days to prepare, I really appreciated the support of the community. There were more than 100 attendees. I really knew there was a market for these types of events. It kind of compacted everything else that I've experienced, all my other motivations and inspirations, into finally coming up with a concrete initiative, a concrete platform such as Project Insight.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh my god. So that was structured.
I really liked how you drew different parts of your life from all the way to high school, going to college and med school, and even other things that you've attended. And so all of these sort of played a role, I guess, in building what is now Project Insight, I guess, right?
Yeah, yes, yes.
So how were you able to form the team? Like, do you know people with similar interests, or you decided to like what you said, you wanted to sort of expand the topics that you wanted to handle?
So in terms of building a global network, generally my close friends in high school are nerds and they're studying all over the yeah they're studying all over the world. So I have friends in the US, I have friends in Hong Kong, in Singapore. Yeah, they're mostly into business and the social sciences. So it wasn't really hard to expand in that sense. I have a problem with recruiting people in humanities. So
Whoops, really?
yeah, because so actually before Project Insight, I didn't know Tia.
Yeah, we met because of this. Yeah.
Yeah,
Ooh.
Wow.
but then if you look at the other correspondents, like the social science, and business correspondents, they're mostly my close friends. Because I don't know a lot of people in the humanities, so I guess even now we're still expanding, especially in that cluster.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So also from my orgs and involvements, so I mentioned that I attended this conference in January. So I was able to meet so many remarkable people from other countries. So it's a really humbling experience, especially because in Intermed, the College of Medicine will keeps telling us that we're the cream of the crop. Yeah, but then the people I've met and befriended from all over the world are crazy talented. Like they win a lot of competitions. They've represented their countries in the UN. Some of them have master's degrees at such a young age. So it's there is really isn't a shortage when it comes to these types of people. And the way I packaged it, it's super flexible since everyone is doing internships, leading their own organizations. It's like sort of like BuzzFeed, where you only really organize a project when you wanna do it. Well, okay, it's not really like BuzzFeed because they get paid to do it and pressured to do it on like a regular basis. But then I guess with us, you only really have to work when it's your event.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's flexible. In terms of establishing domain specific clusters, I guess when I hang out with my friends, these are generally the topics we talk about since again, they're nerds. Yeah, we're nerds. Yeah, so generally you talk about politics, like investing, public health, religion, art. So I wanted a space for them to nerd out about these things as well. So
Aw.
it's sort of like a refuge for nerds, like Tia. Um,
Hey, hey.
yeah,
She got insulted. Oh no.
yeah, 40 books a
No, I'm
year.
kidding. I love nerds. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, it's a compliment. It's a huge
It
compliment.
is.
Personally, yeah, it's a way for me to learn about things I've neglected in the past year because of med school. So we don't follow the idea of correspondence religiously. Like any like Tia, despite being a humanities correspondent, she was a co-moderator for our planetary health event, which was a science event. So we're not really strict with that. What we're strict about is the cycle. So like sort of like the avatar. Like right, it's earth, then
Wow.
fire, then then air, then water. For us, it's science, social science, business, and humanities. We make sure to follow that so that our topics remain diverse and evenly distributed across all domains.
You really are passionate about this, like passion project talaga. In choosing the platform, what made you choose Zoom?
Okay, so we chose Zoom because it looks very professional. And I think it's part of the new normal. Like we assume that a lot of people from all over the world have it installed in their devices because it's like the platform that schools are using, that businesses are using. Also, we actually subscribe to the webinar feature, which costs around $40 per month. So, with the webinar feature, only panelists can talk, and the audience can't unmute themselves or turn on their videos. So, because for the coffee panel discussion that I did before Project Insight, yeah, we noticed with just the regular meeting function, like people would there would be a lot of technical difficulties. Like people would just interrupt in the middle, even if you give them even if you lay out the rules at the very beginning. Facebook Live because we have it on Zoom, but we also stream it on Facebook. There's a live stream on Facebook every week. Right now we're just sticking to Facebook because we're relatively young. Most of our viewers learn about us through Facebook, and it's the most accessible. But we plan to expand to YouTube because we've kind of established our global audience. I think Facebook's just popular in the Philippines, but YouTube would be easier to promote through other platforms. Because I
Mhm.
noticed that Thai and Indonesians use Line, Singaporeans use Telegram. I think WhatsApp has the largest scope because it's huge in India and we get a lot of Indian viewers. And even in Europe, they use WhatsApp. So,
Wow.
but then aside from that, I'd say Instagram is the most global. So we want to focus on that too.
Wow. It's
The
very
international
specific for the
viewers.
platforms. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so now that you've talked about the platform that you wanted to use for this kind of conference, now I'm wondering about the show format. No? This is a very unique kind of discussion. It's not like, okay, say TED, wherein you just listen to a speaker talk. You actually have a role here. The curator has a role here, and he has to facilitate the discussion, make sure that the conversation is going. What made you want to use this sort of format, this kind of way of conducting these sessions?
Well, I actually gave the team a lot of freedom in terms of event types. I wouldn't mind if it's just one to two speakers delivering a lecture.
Mhm.
But personally, it's because of our large scope that everything's been a facilitated discussion so far. It's like the go big or go home mentality because when's the next time we're gonna do an event on Southeast Asian cinema? When's the next time we're gonna do an event on artificial intelligence? So yeah, that's the reason why we do panel discussions.
Maybe just to add to what Leonard was saying, I think because our branding is very global and also very interdisciplinary, so I guess panel discussions represent that best because it's like we're trying to show our audience that regardless of the field that we're passionate in, you can talk to five people with five different perspectives and learn so much. And I think personally, when I plan events for Project Insight, I also enjoy panel discussions as a format because I feel like the panelists also learn from each other. Whereas if it's like say one speaker only, they're just going to be sharing and sharing and sharing. But then with panel discussions, you have experts conversing on a platform that they've never used before. They're connecting in ways that they never have before. So I think that's really important with the message that the entire organization is trying to get across.
So how do you choose the topics? Like, do you guys have a process? Because I think one of the discussion topics was Southeast Asian cinema, and that's very specific. So how were you able to lead to the topics that you have now?
So o- okay. So Southeast Asian cinema was actually my idea because I just got into film. So think of Project Insight as something like TED. It can be about anything under the sun. Yeah, discourse on COVID is important, but I don't think there's anything wrong with leaving some space for your interests or the correspondence interest. Like the pandemic has also taken a heavy toll on the film industry. Like thousands of film workers displaced from the ECQ, they're unemployed because film productions are on hiatus. And also when it comes to humanities, different art forms, social realist films, novels, etc., they're able to communicate the stories of marginalized communities. So even if the title doesn't seem like makes it seem like it's not relevant, you'll eventually realize once you're in the event that it was actually heavily affected by the pandemic, our global situation as well.
So what's the backstory behind your first webinar?
As I said, I'm interning at DOH and working on a project with the Red Cross. So I guess I was interested in the topic because I was genuinely curious about how the pandemic was being addressed in other countries. Um, Usually, what you see on Western media, you'll only find the success stories or like failures, like terrible failures. What about our neighbors like Indonesia, Thailand? What about countries like Mongolia?
So what was the experience like when you moderated that discussion and you were amongst very accomplished and very influential guests? Like, what were you feeling?
Well, I was nervous, but not really because of the guests. As I mentioned earlier, working with and talking to experts have been a big part of high school and college. But since it was our first event, I was doing so many other things while the discussion was ongoing. So Tia would know I'm a terrible micromanager. But fortunately, after in the succeeding events, I was able to hand over certain aspects of event organization, and I was able to find people I trust.
On that note, talking about these different things, I'm actually really curious to know, how do you choose the specific guest for each session? I've seen in your list that they're from, like you said, from India. There's some from New Zealand and other parts of the world. How does one simply just come up with this specific person from this specific place? Like, is there a certain criteria maybe that you're looking for?
Oh well, that's what the global network is for. Like
Mhm.
getting my friends from studying in different countries. We can easily invite professors from the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, from Yale and US, or Georgetown, or UPenn, or UCLA. So it really expands our network. Getting
Mhm.
people from all over, studying all over the world. When it comes to the med community, I guess that's sort of my domain. Think of it as like the ISEC of for med students. It's called the International Federation of Medical Students Associations. So we actually have like a week long conference next week. So that's really how I'm able to tap into my friends' connections. I'm able to invite speakers like their professors, like the professors of my friends that I make in these conferences. But for the COVID event, the first event, since it was our first time to do a global event, we really wanted an international lineup. We weren't like particularly targeting any country. Coincidentally, we were able to invite someone from New Zealand, which has been commended on an international level for their response against COVID.
Yeah, I see how the international, the global lens works, and like how you were able to get all of these guests, and that's very nice. So tapping into the resources of your friends abroad. And what surprised me was these are also your professors pala, no, from the other schools of your friends.
Yes.
In this conference that you moderated, through the global lens, Was there a particular moment that was most memorable to you, or maybe a quote that stuck with you after moderating that?
That was like 8 weeks back, so I don't remember a specific quote.
Yeah, okay,
But
okay, maybe buzzwords or an idea, maybe.
I guess since we got representatives from countries of different income levels, I guess it's the large disparity between a developing and a developed country. For public health professionals in the Philippines, they have to ensure that interventions are cost efficient, while in New Zealand, they had the capacity to invest in technological innovations to do contact tracing and to manage the pandemic. But aside from that, I guess it's the idea of being evidence based in public health. Like it's so easy to assume certain things.
Yeah.
I was expecting like Indonesia and Philippines to say that, oh, it's hard because we're an archipelago. It's a super devolved health system. Yeah, but we often forget that public health is ultimately a science. So you back it up with statistics, with surveillance, with analysis. I actually learned from that discussion that the idea of being an archipelago actually served as a pro as well in terms of addressing the COVID situation, because like having an archipelago, even if it's harder to reach, health promotion efforts will take more time to reach those far flung areas. In a way, it's like they're isolated, so it's harder for COVID to get in as well.
Mm.
So that's like, I guess that's like one specific moment that struck me during the session.
Right. I really like what you said about being evidence based in public health, and you acknowledge that public health is actually a science, and I think that's something that people tend to forget now, and especially when they conduct research, when they conduct studies, they ground
Mm.
everything in evidence. I think that's something that we can all take note of, or that we can remember at least. So we can go on and on about all of this, Leonard. Especially this is the first one that you've moderated. But now I'm interested to know about Tia's. She moderated planetary health. Am I right, Tia?
Yes.
Towards a better
Um.
normal, I think was the subtitle of that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so, I want to know, how did the topic of planetary health come about?
Maybe just a brief background on what planetary health is. It's basically a new field that deals with both climate change and the issues of public health. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like the interaction of the climate crisis and public health. Like for us to be able to fix our healthcare systems, we need to fix the climate crisis and vice versa. So at first, to be honest, because the team who worked on this was just me, Leonard, and Trisha, my co-moderator. At first, the name of our chat was Eco-Conscious Event. Um, and yeah, that that was the original intention. We wanted to come up with an event to help people get to know the more intellectual and academic side of sustainable living, eco-conscious lifestyles, etc. But
Mm-hmm.
I know you guys on this podcast are super big on like talking about things that aren't talked about enough. I personally felt like this topic is kind of saturated, if that makes sense. Not because like, oh, parang everyone's sustainable now, everyone's like eco-conscious now, but more of there are already bigger and better organizations talking about this. What more can we offer? Like I wanted Project Insight to bring something new to the table, to the discussion. And so we were brainstorming and we couldn't really narrow down, okay, what about eco conscious? What about sustainable living? When finally, Leonard used his super amazing network, he introduced us to Dr. Renzo Ginto, who is an expert on planetary health. And we met with Dr. Renzo, and the four of us agreed that since planetary health is not really like a common term, people don't talk about it enough yet. We wanted to introduce it to our audience, our super young audience, as an interdisciplinary discussion. That we can't talk about public health and climate change only considering those two issues. We need to bring economists to the discussion. We need to bring urban planners to the discussion. We need to bring textile experts to the discussion. And it kind of just grew from that. Like we kept trying to keep that interdisciplinary approach in mind as we contacted speakers, as we came up with the questions. So, yeah.
Right. And what I appreciate so much in this discussion was that you kept the interdisciplinarity aspect in that. And I think it's very important because you can't really approach one single problem just looking at it through the lens of, say, science or the lens of business, for example. Yeah, and I like
Definitely,
how
yeah.
you brought in the textile fellow. I mean, that's definitely a unique perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe what are some hopes of your own hopes of a future discussion on topics given this line of interdisciplinary thinking?
I think I wanna keep it that way. Like as I emphasized also earlier, being global and being interdisciplinary is something that I hope every event, not just in the humanities cluster, but every event of Project Insight, I wanted to emphasize that we're using our global networks, we're using our connections from every season in our life to build a more holistic um, platform. Like, I hopefully want to inspire the young people that we in our audience that, you know, even if you want to be a doctor, even if you want to be a lawyer, that's not the only thing you can be. Like Leonard is into so many different things. He's into film, he's into different cuisines of the world, but he's still becoming a doctor. And I think not just our team emphasizes that, but the events that we try to mount. Like it's a constant message of, okay, you're not ever just one thing.
So, as a humanities correspondent for this and someone who wants to go to medicine, how have you developed and strengthened your passion for these two fields that are actually often separated by the academe?
I think it's one of my personal advocacies to not, because you asked how do you get passionate in two separate fields that are separated by the academe. I think that mindset is the first step to debunking that. Like you shouldn't see your interests as separate fields. It's not like, okay, I'm just pursuing humanities and I'm just pursuing medicine. Like these are separate things. Like I'm a staunch believer of like creating hybrids of different fields, if that makes sense. Because like
Yeah, yeah.
bio, yeah, yeah, like in biology, wow, Leonard, correct me if I'm wrong, okay? But in, in biology, a hybrid is a cross between two different species, and the offspring would have an equal distribution of both characteristics. So, correct ba, Leonard? If I'm wrong, just take it out, okay? but but yeah, so that's how I like to see my interests. Like I'm not working on, okay, I'm good at a little bit of the humanities, I'm good at a little bit of medicine. No, like I want to pursue the brainchild of the humanities and medicine. Like, because I personally think that the world that we live in today, wow, the world that we live in today is no longer values specialization as much. Because to be honest, if you have an idea, if you have a vision, I hate to break it to you, but someone probably already thought of it, right? Someone
Yeah,
probably already put it out there. So if you're not the next Mark Zuckerberg, your next best bet is to combine random fields and see what you can make out of it. And I guess that's why when Leonard got me on board for the science event, even if I'm more humanities, I was so willing because
mhm,
it was another opportunity for me to advocate for that you it's not being a jack of all trades and a master of none. It's more of, okay, I see that there are necessary connections between these fields, so that's what I'm going to pursue rather than a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So yeah, sorry, I said so many things, but
no,
yeah.
no, no. I love what you said because I really agree. As in, you really have to show that people aren't just, two dimensional, that we have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things. We are capable of a lot of things. And you guys are showing that. Na it's not, we're not separated. Diba?
Yes,
Leonard
yes.
said a while ago, Avatar. So now I'm going to quote Avatar about it not being separated into the four nations. Just joke lang. But joke lang. So about Project Insight, and actually guests were thoroughly impressed by the questions that were being asked during the discussion. So were these planned ahead or were they decided in the moment?
I think because from the beginning of the planetary health event, we had agreed that it would be interdisciplinary. Trisha, Leonard, and I really had to make a conscious effort to connect all of our questions. Like, no joke, I think in a span of 1 week, we met for a total of 8 hours. Parang we met thrice, 2 hours each meeting just to string our questions together. Because, these panelists, although they're experts in their fields, they've never met each other. And in fact, because we had an urban planner, an economist, a planetary health expert, and a textile expert. And three of those four speakers have nothing to do with planetary health. So it was our job to make sure that they had something to talk about, right? So
Mhm.
Trisha and I really tried to, and Leonard even, we all tried to connect. Okay, like how does an urban planner's work have anything to do with a textile expert? How does planetary health have anything to do with all their fields? So definitely there was a high degree of preparation, but I would say like maybe 30% was still spontaneous because we prepared as much as we could, but we had no control over the answers, right? Like I wouldn't know how the urban planner would respond. He could have brought up a new topic that was totally not in our script. But I guess we address that by just constantly communicating and listening well, because I'm sure Jeff and Nina, you guys know that you can't just like shoot out questions. You have to tie it and connect it and everything.
Yeah.
So there was definitely
Right.
yeah, like that aspect of spontaneity. But it's still better to come prepared, I would say.
Yeah, definitely come prepared always in anything. and
Mhm.
especially as a con- and especially in an event as big as this, it would look quite awkward if you weren't prepared.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of being spontaneous, and
Mm.
and that's true. You can never control the answers that come out of these guests, but you know there's still value in preparing ahead for what they can possibly
Definitely.
say, and stringing these things together must be no easy task. I'm sure. You mentioned that you had an 8-hour meeting. Like, wow, that's
Okay, no,
a
that was like 2 hours spread out to like 4 days or something like that. Basta like a lot of hours.
okay, long meetings. And so
Hmm.
I'm sure there are many different moments that you could take away from the planning to the webinar itself.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll ask the both of you. Maybe you can give some answers.
Hmm.
What were your favorite moments from maybe from the webinar or from the process or so far?
Go ahead, Leonard.
Okay. So for me, I think it was a transgender event, specifically something that Mela Habihan said. So she's a transgender rights advocate from the Philippines. So actually before the event, this was the event right after mine, the one on COVID. So I wasn't really excited about it, because like I don't have, to be honest, like I don't have any friends who are transgender. But then she was able to bring up the idea of self medication across the transgender community. So this is about like transgender people resorting to self medication and to the black market due to the cultural barriers of our community. I thought I had nothing to do with the topic initially, but realized that in a way I was able to adopt a new mission, something that I need to be more mindful of as a future physician who wants to make healthcare accessible to all.
Yeah. For me, I think from my event, the planetary health event, towards the end, Dr. Renzo, he was the planetary health expert, and Professor Augie, he was an economist. I think I had a question that went something like, how will shoot, what was that question, Leonard? Yung parang when Sir Augie was super honest and like the government's not gonna prioritize that. What did I ask? Do you remember?
I'm not sure. I think I remember a question on measuring environmental efforts as like an economic indicator. Or is that something
Oh,
else?
okay. Okay, yeah, yeah. I think yeah, I think I was basically asking the economist like how can we incorporate planetary health in our economy for the new normal? And he straight up said, of course we'd all love for, all industries to converse like this and to consider both climate change and public health. But to be honest, in the Philippines, the government's not going to prioritize that. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to the hierarchy of our government's priorities. And to be honest, the environment might not be up there as much as public health. Like, and I think that struck me because it's one thing to invite panelists to discuss their fields. It's another to get them to talk really honest. I think that's what stuck with me, that yes, it's great that we're conversing and we have these panel discussions, but we also have to be pragmatic, that we do have limits to approaching planetary health, and we do have limits to the priorities of our economy. So I guess it was just refreshing for someone to be brutally honest. That's the short answer.
We've talked about your favorite moments and your favorite guests also. So, if Project Insight had to end tomorrow, who would you want to have as a guest and what topic would they discuss?
For me, I think I wouldn't invite a public health professional because I plan to get into public health and have like a lifetime ahead of meeting public health professionals, working with them. So yeah, I'm not gonna go into public health or medicine. Maybe a panel on Chinese food.
Ooh.
Wow, I like that.
So I want to invite Carolyn Phillips. So she's the author of this cookbook, All Under Heaven: Recipes from the 35 Cuisines of China. I want to invite Clarissa Wei. So she's a food writer, particularly into Chinese and Taiwanese cuisines. I want to invite maybe a Chinese fine dining chef. And I want to invite a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner to talk about how Chinese medicine heavily influenced the the cuisine that developed from China. Because we're usually only familiar with Cantonese, Fujianese, because we're in the Philippines and most of the Chinese diaspora are from those regions. But then people fail to see that there are actually 8 regional cuisines, and aside from that, there's so many more ethnicities that have their own cuisines. We have the Uyghurs, we have Zhejiang cuisine, we have Beijing cuisine. There's so much more to it.
So, Tia, how about you?
I think for me, my concept would be simple. We've been talking to adults and experts. I'd want young people to get on an event. Like, I'd want future lawyers, future architects, future doctors to converse and talk about how we plan to approach a better normal in our respective fields. Because obviously, after this pandemic, we can't do things the same way anymore. So I'd want young people to really have that conversation of like, okay, moving forward, how can we all work together in our future careers to make sure that this doesn't happen again?
Well, really, it's to be able to tackle the world's problems, like what you've showed with Project Insight. Interdisciplinary and intersectoral action really is necessary. Especially, like, I'm really impressed with that planetary health. That was amazing. So from the
Mhm.
outside looking in, intersectoral discussions are really your foundation, right? So how else
Mhm.
can entities from different fields and domains share their insights and potentially collaborate aside from these discussions?
To be honest, we've only had one event that was like really intersectoral, and that was the planetary health event. But I guess to a lesser extent, also our how to staying resilient as the private sector and the artificial intelligence ethics events. Intersectoral discussions are good because they make you learn about issues that you never knew existed. Think of it like Vox, the Vox YouTube channel. Like I watch Vox for the food and the geopolitics videos, but I was able to branch out to extremely random topics like uncomfortable benches, biomimicry. So think of it like that. But other than intersectoral discussions, it's a really difficult question to answer. I think
Yeah.
discussions in a way throughout the possibility. I think awareness usually means that the potential for collaboration is still at its infancy,
Yeah.
something still being explored.
Mhm.
But I guess to be more specific, at least speaking from my background in public health and having been able to engage in a nice conversation with this pharmacist working for the WHO recently, it's important to take an upstream, downstream, and side stream approach. Downstream meaning reaching
Mm.
out to the people. Side stream
Mm.
meaning checking up on your colleagues, like checking up on other public
Mm.
health professionals, other doctors.
Mm.
Are they willing to collaborate? Do they see the benefits and potential? Upstream meaning on a more legislative level, but usually this comes after years of gradually gaining momentum for something.
Mm.
I guess it's a great opportunity for the youth because it's a lot less bureaucratic. You can come up with
Mm.
something after a late night convo with your friend or your crush who happens to be super passionate about a different field. Unlike with
Mhm.
adults where you have to schedule meetings, it all has to be formal.
Yeah. I'll just build on the what Leonard touched on about the youth. I think, to be honest, when we invite these panelists, if they wanted to have a discussion, they didn't have to wait for a youth organization to reach out to them. They would have had that discussion. They have the resources. So I think this platform is more for the young audience. It's really just proving that, okay, you can have these conversations even if they're super random. You can collaborate even if you never worked with each other before. And I think, of course, it's just discussion, it's just inspiration. But hopefully, our audience, when they look back and they're already established in their careers, they remember Project Insight and they see the value of collaborating with people who are so different from them, people who have really different stories and backgrounds.
Right, and that's really fascinating that you touched on the youth. And personally, I feel that we as youth, we really have this responsibility to
Mm.
take action and move move the globe forward, because there's
Mm.
so many forces that are acting against progress. And I think the
Mhm.
youth is one of the best arms that can forward that. And there is this contending thought, especially, I don't know, maybe it's here in the Philippines or in Asia, that, oh, bata ka pa, or in other words, you're still a kid. What do you know? You don't know how things work. And you had
Mhm.
a speaker that specifically said, ang kabataan ang pag-asa ng bayan, which is
Mhm.
the youth are the hope for the future. And
Mhm.
do you think that this perception of the youth, or perception of young people making big waves of change, you think has that perception has changed at this day and age, or do you think that's still something that's still very much present?
I think while it's true that there are adults like that, the ones I've met and consider to be good mentors have been extremely supportive in everything that I do. So also the 28 speakers that we've had so far all wouldn't have agreed to join our events if they had this notion. So maybe it's a matter of surrounding yourself with experts, adults who are passionate in that way. I'm sure, like to our audience, to our listeners, I'm sure everyone's met somebody like that, or I'm sure they've met dozens. So I guess it's a matter of just reaching out.
For me, I guess anytime people throw very hasty generalizations about our generation like that, before getting insulted, I try to consider their context first. Because if you think about it, our parents' generation rather, they grew up with no pandemic. They could freely pursue their career. They could freely enjoy their youth without having to solve a problem as detrimental as a pandemic, right? But on the other hand, our generation, in the trajectory of history, we were tasked with fixing the problems that were exposed by this pandemic. So, like, because, like they usually say, like, you guys are so idealistic, you guys are so positive and optimistic. Parang when you grow up and you see reality, mawawala din yan. I think it's wrong in the sense that our generation has to be idealistic. We have to view reality through like this kaleidoscope of idealism simply because we're tasked to fix the new normal. We have to be visionaries because our parents never left us with a blueprint of like, how do we address post pandemic reality? Our grandparents, they went through World War and they would have something to say about how to fix a world after a war. But we have no idea what's going to happen after this pandemic. So I think it's only right for us to be overly idealistic because we have to be visionaries and builders of the next normal. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. That's actually very powerful. And I totally agree, and I resonate with the fact that the the generations that came before us didn't have to deal with this new normal. And
Mm-hmm.
right now in our hands, we have to remedy this whole fiasco that we have to face with
Mm-hmm.
every single day. I think I just want to ask, and so that our listeners can also have some sort of idea, how can we push, the boundaries of youth empowerment beyond just being vocal? I mean, of course, being vocal is very important. That's crucial, actually. We have to speak up. But how can the youth specifically become more actively involved in local communities, for example?
I think there are many ways to be empowered. Like you can join organizations, ask if you can shadow or intern under somebody. But basically reach out to experts. That's like the overarching message that I want to relay to our viewers for this evening. Um, Take online courses, learn a language, read about our country or other countries, watch films. Yeah, there's so many ways to be empowered. But I guess in line with the advocacy of Project Insight, yeah, the main message that I want to relay is that yeah, reach out to experts.
For me, I think I love seeing how young people now, like even people younger than us, are so involved in like organizations, advocacy work, community work, and it's really so inspiring. But I guess a more practical tip I'd like to give the listeners is, if you're going to support a movement, make sure you have connected with the people that you're helping. Because it's great that people are vocal and that, we all have the freedom to use our voices on social media. But you're only going to be as powerful as what you have seen and what you have experienced. So, for example, you want to get involved with public health, get experience working in medical missions, volunteer in your local local projects and everything. Because if you have no idea of like the actual condition of the grassroots in your certain advocacies, it's gonna be futile to just be vocal, and you would live up to that label of our generation just being vocal and not acting. So I guess, if for those who plan to start their own organizations or want to join organizations, make sure that it's not it's idealism coupled with experience. So make sure that you use the reality, but at the same time don't lose that hope and those goals and that idealism you have when you're helping these people.
That's so true. We really have to use that hope and that ideals that we have for the future and turn it into action. And much like what you're doing with Project Insight. So as you said earlier, our generation really has to be the ones that help everyone transition into this new normal. So considering the current global situation, what role and purpose do you see for Project Insight? And what is the place of Project Insight and its members in the midst of everything going on in the world right now?
Well, generally, to begin with, all our members are student leaders, student experts of their respective fields. So I wanted to create this as an avenue for them to share what they value to the world. I think all disciplines are dynamic. Everything is actively evolving. So Project Insight is really here to connect people to experts from all over the world, to communicate these new changes, these new findings, expert opinions, and calls to action. And I think aside from communicating information already in the existing body of knowledge, we're able to reach new conclusions and in a way generate new knowledge by inviting, yeah, like the planetary health event, an urban planner, a physician, a fashion designer, an environmental economist in one discussion.
Like you said, there are different. There's a vast variety of guests who were speaking, and there's one in particular who I actually want to point out, and that is the discussion on the Southeast Asian cinema with one of the directors. I think his name is Yus Liu Hua. Am I saying his name right, Leonard?
I think so.
Anyway, so the line goes: "We make films that reflect ourselves at that point in time. There is a deliberate effort to find your own voice in the kind of films you're making." And this whole idea of making something, generating something, uh, you guys, in a sense, are quite kind of content creators to an extent, right? And how does this insight resonate with your vision of Project Insight? Being creating this new thing.
Um, I guess on the part of the correspondents, a lot of planning really goes into our events. As Tia mentioned earlier, for the planetary health event, we had like a total of 8 hours of meetings. Um, so if with TEDx, talking to the speakers before an event, discussing their ideas, discussing their talk is the best part, in my opinion. For Project Insight, I think that's the brainstorming, like the conceptualization of the event, coming up with the different guide questions that we want to ask, the objectives that we want to meet. So it's tiring because for now we do it on a weekly basis.
Mhm.
We create content every week. Um, but we really try to include what we genuinely want to learn. So I guess that's the fun
Mhm.
part. As I said, this is like a refuge for nerds. So I guess I think Tia and along with the other correspondents, they really enjoy what we do.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, we're just like what you guys are doing on this podcast. We're all just trying to really tell our stories. Like, we as correspondents may not be talking as much as the panelists, but there's a little bit of us in those panel discussions because they stem from our interests, they stem from what we grew up with, what we grew up enjoying. And I guess that's just like any other medium like this podcast, we're really just trying to tell stories and be refuge also for people who don't get to tell their stories.
Well, yeah, definitely. I think all of us really want to show the world what we're interested in or what we find important. So, given
Mm-hmm.
your growing reach, what voice do you envision for Project Insight moving forward?
I wish we could stimulate discourse. We want to be more interactive. So part of our plans is to create a group in which people can exchange ideas directly with mentors. So maybe through a Facebook group. We don't know yet because we're really busy with other engagements as well. Um, but we also want to focus on expanding our reach per event, and also because we're school is about to start, so we're gonna get busier. So maybe around 1 to 2 events per month instead of weekly events. So and we noticed that there are like huge disparities in terms of viewers. Some events get more viewers than others. So we really want to focus on marketing each event to more people.
All right. We've covered a vast range of topics, starting
Mm-hmm.
from the COVID-19, all the way to planetary health, and a big jump to textile. And I just find that so fascinating. I'm sorry. And this whole theme of interdisciplinary, the angle of being interdisciplinary really is something very important. And given all the things that we've said, everything we've talked about today, the one last question I would like to ask for the both of you, uh, what's one thing you think listeners have to hear that isn't said enough?
I think yeah, this was common among a lot of the things that I was saying in this podcast. But for me, it's use your youthfulness to your advantage. Reach out to experts. Because
Mhm.
as a student, you have like this room to make mistakes, and experts are generally more receptive. It's fine if you're not an expert if you don't know a lot about something, because that's the point of reaching out to them to begin with. And
Mm-hmm.
I can assure you that a lot of academics, a lot of industry leaders, they're really, really, really passionate. So they get kilig in a way if you ask them, because they're like us correspondents in a way. They're nerds also. So asking them would like give them an opportunity to nerd out about the things that they're passionate about.
Mm-hmm. For me, it's really just practice how to listen to other people, because although interdisciplinary sounds super like big and like wow, so nerdy and academic, you're talking to all these experts from all over the world, but really, like, if you romanticize that, it really comes down to listening. You don't have to be on a panel discussion or a correspondent on Project Insight for you to collaborate with other people. Something as simple as like conversing with your sibling who's taking up a different course, or talking to friends you haven't checked up on in this pandemic who are doing different things. Like, just really listen. And not only because you're doing it for that person, but because, as Leonard said, you can really learn so much just by absorbing from other people. Like, from like this podcast alone, I learned so much, even if you guys are asking me questions, and Leonard also. So I guess, yeah, like that's something that maybe it's said a lot, but it's not practiced a lot. That's mine.
Yeah, this has been really so insightful. And personally, I like just like you, Tia, I learned so much from listening to your insights. And I really admire this effort that you guys have put out there, this initiative that you put out there. It really opens another avenue for young people, not just young people actually, all sorts of people to listen, to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you so much for sharing this this to the world. Yeah, I think that's something worth complimenting, and that this sort of effort is rare. I mean, rare in the sense that the quality this initiative has is rare. I mean, there's so many other different ones, but there are very few ones that actually take the time to listen to their guests and put so much effort and craft into what they're doing. Don't you think, Nina?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm just very impressed that you guys are focusing also on interdisciplinary things. And you're definitely right that the bigger, in like the larger scale of like the world problems and issues, everything, I think we always have to look inward in terms of what it relates to.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Leonard, Tia,
Thank
for
you.
spending time with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah. Oh, we look forward to seeing what's in store for Project Insight because I'm sure there's so much more in store.
Yes, this is Leonard's brainchild. It's his baby.
Mhm.
Okay, so thank you again, and thank you for everyone who's listening to us. So until next time, I'm Jeff,
I'm Nina.
and this has been Hear Him Out.